to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG-10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.
The revolutionary armed forces were forced to storm the fort, and in the process, the following persons were killed: Maurice Bishop, Unison Whiteman, Vincent Noel, Jacqueline Creft, Norris Bain, and Fitzroy Bain, among others.
Some perceive that what is happening in Grenada can lay the basis for a new socio-economic and political path of development.
To kill all of us in the room. Everybody in yes, and and anybody else who's so foolish has to go up there to say they're supporting them.
Yeah. When it comes for cooking or whatever, I will take up my pot and cook. But when it comes for defending my country, I will defend my country.
We in Grenada here should be in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. Our revolution was the first revolution in the history of the English-speaking Caribbean. Our revolution came out at a time when the people of the world were up in arms about the oppression, when the people of the world were told to take them.
Let us remember our struggling sisters and brothers in Africa, in Namibia, in South Africa, who are presently fighting against white racist minority regimes.
So we have a very historic task, a very noted and remarkable task to ensure that the revolution in Grenada stays there, remains, and that it grows from strength to strength.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special airing of the Bub Report. Now, 40 years ago this week, a series of leadership challenges in the upper echelons of the New Jewel Movement's Central Committee came to a head, following the September 1983 proposal for joint leadership to be shared between Bernard Cord and Maurice Bishop, a proposal the Prime Minister initially accepted, according to Central Committee minutes. The last days of the late Prime Minister Maurice Bishop commenced on September 28, 1983, when he led a delegation to Eastern Europe to drum up support for the revolutionary projects in Grenada. On October 8th, Bishop returned to Grenada after a brief stopover in Cuba. Little did he know that this would be his last visit to Grenada's closest Caribbean ally at the time. Upon his return to the island, Bishop reneged on the joint leadership proposal and was placed under house arrest on October 13th at Mount Weldale, the Prime Minister's residence at the time. Now, also around that time, the rumor mill in Grenada swirled as citizens got wind of the leadership tensions at the top. Some of the rumors suggested that Bernard Cord and his wife Phyllis were planning to kill Bishop, and this led to Cord's resignation a day after Maurice Bishop was arrested. The events went downhill from there, and public sentiment eventually boiled over on October 19, 1983, when close to 30,000 citizens released Bishop from confinement at his home. They eventually made their way to Fort Rupert via the Market Square, where the decision was taken by segments of the People's Revolutionary Army to retake the military barracks there. The exchange of fire between the Bishop faction and elements of the PRA led to the eventual execution of Maurice Bishop and some members of the People's Revolutionary Government, bringing a tragic end to one of the most dynamic periods of post-colonial Grenadian history. This evening, we sit with three players who were involved in the revolution as they reflect and remember the events that led to the demise of the Grenada Revolution. Now, for today's program, we are joined by Ms. Merle Hodge, who is a retired university lecturer, as well as Mr. Don Rojas, who was a former press secretary to Prime Minister Maurice Bishop, and Mr. Ken Lewis, who was a former youth leader of the Blue Jewel Movement's National Youth Organization. Panelists, welcome to this evening's special edition of the Bub Report.
Thank you.
Thank you for your invitation.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure having all of you here. And of course, this year is a significant year for the commemoration of October 19th. It is the first time that Grenada is actually honoring October 19th as a national holiday. This must be significant for all of you. Mr. Rojas, for you as well. Can you talk about being back in Grenada? I know that there was a period when you were not allowed into the country, but you're back now. So could you talk about the feeling on the ground for you being back in Grenada, observing October 19th this year?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you and the rest of our colleagues today. For me personally, and my wife, who is accompanying me on this visit to Grenada, it is an absolute pleasure to be back here in what is arguably one of the most beautiful islands in the Caribbean. One could say it was crafted by the hands of God itself. That's how extraordinarily beautiful it is. It's great to be back in that physical environment, which is always a nurturing and healing environment for us, and I dare say for lots of our colleagues. And it's also it presents us with an opportunity to pay tribute and to honor the remarkable life and legacy of Maurice Bishop and the other national heroes and martyrs who perished with him, alongside of him, on that fateful day of October 19, 1983. The memories, painful memories of that day are etched in my memory and remain deep in my soul. So for me to return to Grenada to participate in commemoration events that honor the life and legacy of Maurice Bishop and the martyrs is a distinct personal honor for me. And I want to salute the Dickon Mitchell administration for its courageous decision to declare October 19th a national holiday, and also to lift up the memory of the Grenada Revolution in a way that has not been done for the past 4 decades. So they have done for the Grenadian people a great service by recognizing this day. I hope as well that they will continue to press for answers about the whereabouts of the remains of those who were killed on the fort on October the 19th. That remains apparently a mystery. I do believe that the U.S. State Department has some information about those remains, and for one reason or another have decided not to make that public. But the Grenadian people are owed an explanation because those remains must enjoy the right, as every other Grenadian, to reside for time immemorial in the country of their birth and their origin, and that is yet to happen. So I hope that movement to pressure the U.S. government to do something about this and to do the right thing about this will will continue, not only by this administration, but also by other forces around the Caribbean region. So that would be my opening remarks. Basically, is to say that for me personally, this is a deeply emotional moment, because I happen to have lived through those traumatic days and survived. But for me, what will always remain deeply seared in my psyche is what the Grenada Revolution was able to achieve in the short 4.5 years of its existence. And I think that story, along with what happened on October 19th, what happened for 4.5 years before that, is a story that needs to be told. It should not be swept under the rug. It is part and parcel of the glorious history of resistance and struggle of the Grenadian people, going all the way back to Julien Ferdinand, through T.A. Marichaud, people like Tubal Uriah Buzz Butler, who was born in Grenada, and so on and so on. That is a long tradition, and the Grenada Revolution was an expression of that historical tradition, and that should be known to the Grenadian people, particularly to the younger generations that are coming up. They need to be informed about what the revolution stood for, what the revolution achieved, its successes, what it meant in terms of the history, the post-colonial history of Grenada, and what it meant for the people of the Caribbean as a whole. So this is something that should not be swept under the rug or wished away or ignored. This chapter in Grenadian history needs to be brought to the forefront, brought to the surface.
Absolutely. Let me bring in Professor Merle Hodge. Professor, how does it feel to be back in Grenada at this time? I'm sure you made many visits since the demise of the revolution on October 19th, but this year takes on a particularly special significance. So can you reflect on the government of Grenada's decision to declare October 19th as a commemorative holiday in honor of those we lost on that day?
Yes, well, first of all, how I feel about being back in Grenada. Of course, I go to and fro. I have been back since the end of the revolution, and I was here for the whole 4.5 years of the actual revolution. And I want to also say that the experience of the Grenada Revolution is perhaps the most important event in my life. I mean, I've lived all over the world in different countries, and I don't think there's any of those places and any of those experiences that I treasure as much as I do my participating in the Grenada Revolution. So I'm happy to be back here for this event. And I'm happy. I mean, I was just coming to very humbly attend the ecumenical service. I would, but I suppose I should express my gratefulness to you for inviting me to be able to say to anybody in Grenada who might be listening how happy I am to be here among them, especially when this very important step has been taken by the current government. I was so happy to hear that that they had decided to give that event, that day, this kind of focus, as opposed to the grand focus that had been given to the day of what I still call the American invasion. And why I'm so that experience was so important to me is that I saw in action, I saw implemented a vision of the Caribbean, and I consider the whole Caribbean my homeland. I saw a vision of it actually implemented. The way that people in Grenada got together, they formed organizations, they did work in their own community that would not normally be seen as something that the government had to send somebody to do. They repaired roads, they fixed and painted schools, and they just took their development in their own hands. All right, and also the development of popular participation in government, people's participation in government, and it's a real irony, I think, that the revolution should have ended in that way, because the movement to institutionalize people's participation in government by forming the new structures that were being put in place and that were doing very well. The parish councils then, which had to be then broken down into smaller units, and all of that was doing well. People were very, very involved in that. People were very excited. I was living in St. Paul's, and I was a member of the NWO in St. Paul's, National Women's Organization.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we used to hire a bus, and people would fill it up, and we go down to what the first leg of that structure, the people's the parish councils, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people were very enthusiastic about it. But sorry, I want to just go back to the contradiction. The fact that the development of Grenada, a large, and perhaps the most important part of it was the amount of power that was placed in people's hands to have a say in decisions about their country, right? And people were, for example, at those meetings, people could get up and ask any question, get up and buff the people who are supposed to be doing things for them, officials and so in communities, and speak about people who were not doing for them the things that they expected. And so, and the business of government had become an open book, right? So it's very ironic that the revolution should have ended with a process of members of government, holding secret meetings and big decisions being made behind our backs, when we had become so accustomed to taking part in big decisions. But I'll tell you that I don't know who in Grenada knew that all those meetings were taking place, and that those trials of Maurice Bishop in the background.
In respect of the Central Committee decisions and in respect of all of those assassinations, yes.
Yes, and I
Grenada didn't know about this. They did not. There were a lot of rumors swirling based on my reading of it at the time. Yeah.
But I will say that the book by Godfrey Smith, The Assassination of Maurice Bishop, which I read like a year ago. This is when I was enlightened about all of that. I was right here in the country and did not know that all that was taking place. So I think that's a big irony. Secrecy, draconian, I don't know, the decisions, and so, and ending in some deaths that were really, really unexpected. They didn't think of Grenada as a place where that kind of thing can happen.
That type of violence and bloodshed would occur. Yes. Let me bring in Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis, you yourself, you are considered by many as a progressive in many respects, and I'm sure that this year is also special for you in respect of the significance of naming October 19th as a national holiday. You need to unmute the mic there, sir. We can unmute your mic. Yes. Go ahead now. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, and happy to be here. One of the things that someone told me, asking me whether they thought it was a good idea for the government and the Prime Minister to make this Heroes Day, and that, whether they would get pushback in it. And my answer was that sometimes for politicians, for governments, you have to do what is right, regardless of what pushback you get or what others think. And this is one of those days. For me, it's one of the most significant figures for this past century for the Caribbean people. Morris Bishop was gunned down. But for me, it was a lot more. I mean, Vincent Noel was a chess playing partner with my father. Eunice Whiteman was my teacher in PDC. Is one of the persons that became my first mentor for anti-colonialism and so on. You know, Norris Bain, my father was a revenue officer in Grenville. So Norris Bain was his friend. You know, we would go over there after lunch, things like that. So a lot of these people, Jacqueline Creff and my mother, again, teachers, so a lot of this was personal. And I think for many Grenadians, you would feel this way because it's a small country, as Merle was on detailing, everyone in a community was making a difference. And here it was stopped. And not just stopped, but important people, leaders of this movement was murdered. So I don't want to repeat what everyone else said, but very much my sentiments as well. So I think it's a really good move of the Deacon Mitchell administration. And as Don said, they should continue in that vein because there is a lot. You know, one of the things about movements like this, sometimes we treat them like history. We treat them like dead movements. But really and truly, the revolution is not, because if people had to change their existence, if you had to change your reality, one of the things needed is that inspiration, is to say that it was previously done. Someone already did it. And the revolution can be that inspiration, not just for Grenada, but for West Indians in general.
Yeah, and as a blueprint that you can follow in essence. But let me bring in the rest of the panel here, and I want to begin with Mr. Rojas. Did the revolution become a victim of its own success that led to its demise?
That's a provocative question, my brother. I don't think so.
Okay.
But before I expand on that, let me say it is such a pleasure to be on the program, both with Sister Merle Hodge and with my brother, who worked closely with me for a couple of years at the Free West Indian when I was the editor of the Free West Indian newspaper, and when I first went to Grenada. And your guest has been working, literally giving his heart and his soul in terms of his work when he was part of our staff at the Free West Indian. So it's a great pleasure to see him and to be on the same panel with him.
Thank you very much, sir.
And I also want to endorse everything that he just said. I totally agree. You know, the bloody events of October 19th and October 25th, we have to also talk about what happened on October 25th, because in my personal humble opinion, that was not an act of liberation for the Grenadian people. That was an act of subjugation by an imperialist power on a small, defenseless country that had the nerve and the temerity to say to the empire, we are not in your backyard. We are a sovereign, independent country, and we will conduct our internal affairs our way. Now, that takes boldness to say that, right, to the mightiest empire in the world. And that is exactly what Bishop was able to articulate. And the Grenadian people supporting him and loving him gave him that confidence, you know, to not be awed by the powers of the rulers of the empire. I think that is something that needs to be reflected upon. And you know, I believe that those events help to demoralize and to traumatize and to disorient the Grenadian people. This was this triggered off a collective trauma that has been passed down from one generation after the next over the past 40 years. And the time has now come for healing of that collective trauma. The revolution provided the Grenadian people, I think, in my view, a glimpse into the future. What kind of future? A self-determined future, post-independence and post-colonial future. And Bishop was able to articulate a post-colonial vision of what a future Grenada should and could become. And I think that was a very inspiring vision. It remains a vision that has relevance today, not only in Grenada, but across the Caribbean. So I say that the Grenada Revolution is not dead. The spirit of the Grenada Revolution is still very much alive throughout the Caribbean region.
And same question, Professor Hodge, in respect of the revolution being a victim of its own success.
But I have to say I'm not really sure what that means. You think that we got a little I don't know, overconfident or something? I'm not sure.
I believe that's the context of the question, so much so that that overconfidence led to the tensions that emerged in the Central Committee, which they could not resolve.
Yes, but overconfidence on whose part? The people or the government, the Central
The
Committee?
leadership, the leadership.
Oh, well, right. Well, that is not the whole revolution being, but it's all right. The question was whether the destruction of the revolution was due
Victim
to
of its own success. Yes.
Right. Well. I will subscribe to that if you mean the parties involved at the top. That
Yes.
is what they could do, and because it was so interesting to read in the book I just mentioned that even after all the destruction, all the murder, and all of that, the leader of that faction was still tone deaf enough to be sending out for help to other countries. He sent for help. Well, I can't remember the countries, but of the Caribbean and socialist countries, and so to think that anybody would come to the assistance of that bunch, So there was a level of overconfidence here, but it was not on the part of the people on the ground, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken, of course, you were in Cuba at that time. You were, I suppose, one of the you benefited from the success, and you're one of the legacies of that period in respect of what the revolution was able to do for people, that people-centered approach that Professor Hodge talks about. But let us expand this conversation a bit in respect of the build up to October 19th. Now, Ken, obviously you were not in Grenada at the time, you were in Cuba, but I'm sure you were aware of what might have been happening in Grenada at the time. Now, can you reflect on what you were hearing on the ground in Cuba while you were there as a student about what was happening in September in the lead up to what occurred in October?
Well, let me explain a little bit, because I actually left Grenada in September. I think end of September, Don, if I remember well, because I went in 82 and I came back in July. As school was finished for the first year, I was back in Grenada and working back in the Free West Indian. But what I noticed, have you ever left a country and come back and noticed a totally different feel? That was what happened with me. So I left 82, was in Cuba with all the enthusiasm, meeting all these students from around the world. Grenada, of course, in the pinnacle at the time. And I'm coming back to Grenada in 83, and there is a tension. There is a tension, things aren't going, there's a lot of complaints on the ground. The community work is not as exuberant, and certainly not in the numbers as it used to be. And at first I thought it was probably just fatigue over a few years because we were really going hard. But I think also there were some other things happening. There were the pressure from imperialism, the pressure from the United States was stepped up. And there were a lot of overtures happening, things that I didn't know about. But if you're asking me about the feel, there was that feel that something was wrong. So when I returned in September, I was already hearing some people on the ground talking in ways that I did not expect. So there was some tension.
Oh, absolutely. And Donna, I'm going to raise the same question to you. You were close to Maurice Bishop as his press secretary. Now we know that Bishop traveled to Europe, to Eastern Europe. At that time, it was a communist bloc, of course. But in conversations with Bishop before that trip to the Eastern Bloc and before that trip to Cuba, of course, on his return to Grenada, he stopped off in Cuba. Did you get a sense from him in your conversations or in any other people in the leadership of the PRG that there were tensions in there that perhaps growing pains that the revolution needed to address?
Yes, Bishop was aware of the machinations that were taking place in his absence. He had been kept informed, and he knew that something was being planned to either remove him or undermine him. He did not know all of the exact details at the time, but he did have sufficient information and intelligence that there was an effort underway to undermine his leadership as his leadership of the revolution. So when he returned to Grenada from Cuba, when we all returned, one of the significant things that was which sent a message to him and to the rest of us who were on his delegation was that he was not welcomed at the airport as he would normally have been by his deputy prime minister and his entire cabinet. He would, on this particular occasion, they were not present to welcome him at the airport. And he immediately sensed that something was up at that particular point. And then, of course, a few days later, there was a meeting of the entire New Jewel Movement membership, party membership, at which a proposal was put on the agenda for a joint leadership of the revolution. In my opinion, this idea was an absurd and irrational idea that had no precedence in the history of Grenada or the entire Caribbean or anywhere else in the world that I am aware of. I've never heard of any country with a joint leadership. So anyway, Bishop rejected the proposal, although the Central Committee of the party voted for it. Bishop rejected it, and as a consequence, he was put under house arrest. And he remained under house arrest up until the morning of October the 19th, when he was freed by hundreds of young people mostly, who marched up to his residence on that early morning of the 19th, and in defiance of soldiers with weapons who were guarding the compound where the prime minister lived, they broke through the barriers and they went into his house and they liberated him from house arrest. It was a very courageous and dramatic move. They then took him to Fort Rupert, and a few minutes after he arrived at Fort Rupert, the People's Revolutionary Army dispatched a contingent of soldiers in an army vehicle with a very heavy machine gun on it to try to so-called take back the Fort Rupert from Bishop and his supporters. And there was a lot of gunfire that took place at Fort Rupert. and a number of people, including Bishop and some of the other martyrs that we have talked about earlier, perished, were assassinated. I mean, the honest truth is that they were lined up against the wall and shot down like animals. And that is a very painful thing to contemplate, not just for Grenada, but for any civilized nation in the world. To do something like that to its own leadership is a total act of barbarity and cannot be condoned or explained away or excused under any rational or moral grounds, for that matter.
And I'm sure for you, it was also a personally traumatizing
yes,
event
of course.
to hear
Of course
that someone that you were really close to, somebody that you wrote speeches for, somebody you traveled with, was liquidated in such a way.
Yes, of course. It was personally traumatizing for me and for my family. And they suffered the consequences of it. I had to go into hiding. I was being hunted down myself by squadrons of soldiers. My wife was arrested and taken up to the fort and put into incarceration the night of the 19th, leaving my young 8-year-old son at the time on his own. He had to fend for himself. So yes, it was a very traumatic experience for my entire family, not only for myself. But here we are now, 40 years later. We've all grown older and hopefully wiser. And a lot of water has flowed under that bridge. And we are now in a situation where we have an opportunity to reflect soberly and honestly reflect on what it is that the Grenada Revolution was all about, its achievements, as Sister Moore so eloquently put it in terms of participatory democracy, popular democracy, and the creation of structures and organs to institutionalize people's power in the decision-making process of the revolution. No other revolution in Latin, even in Latin America, with the exception maybe of the Cuban Revolution, was moving along moving in that direction. Not the Sandinista Revolution in Nicaragua, which, by the way, came to power in the same year that the Grenada Revolution came to power. Grenada was March of 1979, and the Sandinistas came to power in Nicaragua in July of 1979, the same year. Right, and it was also that same year that Maurice Bishop made a very historic speech at the United Nations General Assembly in September into October of 1979. At that same session of the UN, Fidel Castro and Daniel Ortega, who was the president of Nicaragua at the time, the leader of the Sandinista movement, they both spoke at that same UN General Assembly session in 1979. I would advise and I would recommend that if you have a moment, you could take a look at that speech, take a read of that speech. It is a very accurate summary of the vision and the goals and the aspirations of the Grenada Revolution. And with his speech at the UN, Grenada began to be recognized as an emerging power, power coming out of the developing world that had a global significance. You know, as they say in the United States, Bishop and the Revolution was punching above its weight. You know, you've heard of that expression, yes. Right? Punching above its weight. So, I mean, here's this tiny country of 100,000 people making such an impact on the global political stage at the United Nations, at the Non-Aligned Movement, summit meetings, at other international fora. It was quite amazing. But you know, the spirit of the Grenada Revolution, I believe, continues to live in the hearts and minds of the masses of Grenada and across the Caribbean. So it is important more than ever that history be made available to our younger generation who know really nothing about what happened in Grenada for those 4.5 years. Some of the most exciting developments in the history of Grenada and the Caribbean took place in tiny Grenada between 1979, March of 1979 and October of 1983, a short 4.5 year period.
Yeah,
there's a whole generation that doesn't know anything about that. Not only
and that is why it's important for that history to be taught in schools. You know, it's so critical for that history to be taught in school. But I'm going to bring back Merle here. Merle, now my research tells me that you resigned from serving in the Ministry of Education a couple of days before Maurice Bishop was assassinated on the fort. Tell us why you resigned. Did you get a sense that those tensions were boiling over and you didn't want to be part of it? What happened there?
I didn't resign just before. I had resigned at the beginning of the year, and I had to do the whole term. You can't resign and just step out. Well, I was teaching in the new the new school system, secondary school. There was a major expansion of secondary education. Remember, this is just after independence, in Trinidad and Tobago, as well as other places in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And they had, in order to be able to accommodate a lot of children and to really expand the thing, they had built some large, big schools. And of course, we grew up in schools that were, small, manageable. You could know every child's name and all of that. So a lot of us were having little apprehensions about how this would go. The schools were just too big, as far as I'm concerned, and there were certain problems. I mean, it is sorted out now. I went back to that school recently to visit, and everything is plain sailing. But I heard about the beginning of the revolution on the morning of March 13th. I was driving to school, and it came over the Radio Free Grenada, put it. I don't know how, of course, I don't know anything about the kind of technology, but we heard it directly. The kinds of songs that were played that morning, right? The morning of the storming of the barracks. And I said to him, well, I didn't know what job I was going to go into after that. I just thought I couldn't continue in the job I had. And when I heard that, I decided immediately, I'm going there. That is the job that has been made available to me. This is providence, I almost saw it as I almost saw it in a supernatural way, that this has happened, and this is why I resigned, really, that I had to be free to go there. And I didn't have two thoughts about it. I decided that immediately, and as soon as I could get going, I did. As soon as the term ended, I had that thought out the time that I needed to teach for. Yeah,
absolutely. So you got involved then in more active political organization on the ground in Grenada at that time?
Yeah, no, well, I don't know. I don't know if you know that Jackie Craft was my very close friend. She was living in my family house over there, and she lived there for some years. She was working with the Caribbean Conference of Churches. So I knew all about the NJM and the work of the NJM before the revolution, and I was very impressed with it. And I thought, okay, I will go there and lend a hand, in that kind of work continuing, because in many respects, the work that was done in the revolution, the trends that were set up by the party, were the same things that went into action in the actual revolution. That whole business of participation in decision making, and the need to organize, and the need to get together, to put your hand into your own development. All of that is what the NJM really, they lit a light before the actual revolution, and they just continued on that path. So I knew, and of course, I trusted Jackie, I trusted Morris. I knew all of these people because of her. You know,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's
Now,
ideal.
I want to respect Mr. Rojas's time. So, Mr. Rojas, I'm going to give you an opportunity now to offer some closing comments. And when we return, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll return with Mr. Lewis and Professor Hodge, and we're going to talk about the where were you moments. You know that there's some of those moments in life where you know where you were when it occurred. Yes, October 19th would be one of those days. The intervention, or the invasion, shall we call it, the invasion on October 25th, 1983 will be another. Other geopolitical events, I mean, 9/11. The Palestinians would know when they are, when they're being victimized in the way that they're being victimized now. Yes. So let us talk about that. But Mr. Rojas, I want to give you an opportunity for some closing
Yes,
comments.
I have to apologize that I cannot stay on for the duration of the program.
Yes.
So I have to leave in the next minute or so to welcome other members of our delegation that have just arrived, the delegation of the Institute of the Black World, and we will have a delegation of about 10 people who will be here for the next few days in Grenada, and who will participate in the commemorative events of October 19th. So I just want to make sure that they have arrived safely, that they are settled in to the hotel, etc. So I have a little bit of organizational work still to do.
Yes.
But I want to thank you for inviting me to this discussion. This is a critical conversation that you have started, and I hope you can find time to continue it. There is a lot to talk about. There's a lot to discuss that we can't cover in a mere 1 hour or a few
Yeah.
minutes. But you've made an excellent start, and I would recommend that you find time moving forward to continue with this conversation,
Absolutely.
because it is critical. It is of critical importance not only to Grenadians but to the people across the Caribbean. And I'm very happy to hear you bring up the plight of the Palestinian people. My heart really aches for a people who have been victimized and exploited and oppressed for decades upon decades in their own land, and now today by a fascist regime in Israel that is being propped up by the US administration and by other European governments. I think what we are about to witness could very well be a massive act of genocide in Palestine. I remember very well the meeting that Maurice Bishop had with the Palestinian PLO leader Yasser Arafat. I was present at that meeting, and I remember how Arafat was so supportive and in such solidarity with the Grenada Revolution. So the time has come now for Grenadians and other people of conscience and goodwill, especially in our region of the world, to stand in solidarity with our Palestinian sisters and brothers at this particular time in their perilous history. God knows what will happen in days to come. Here you have a people who are living in literally an open air prison. Just think about that concept. You know, they are locked in a prison without water, without food, without medical supplies, without electricity. 2.3 million people locked up in the most densely populated part of the entire world, and one of the poorest parts of the entire world. And they are now going to be the victims of a war crime carried out by a fascist regime in the Netanyahu government in Israel. Let us keep our eyes on that situation. It has direct relevance to what we are talking about today and what hopefully we will continue to discuss in the future. So thanks again for having me on. My salutations, my greetings, my love to my sister,
and Mr. Lewis. I'm sure you're happy to see Mr. Lewis.
And to my brother, who I know from when he was a younger man, Ken Lewis. Always a man, a brother with lots of energy and great ideas. So
yes. Ken, you wanted to add? Yes, go ahead, Ken.
Just before Don left, I wanted to say thanks very much, because Don was one of the mentors. I had so many mentors. I was so lucky to have so many great mentors, and Don was one of them. Through him, I met people as Samori Marksman, I remember.
Yeah.
Angela Davis.
Great
so many people. Just want to say thanks, brother. And today in the US, I continue that struggle so much with the cooperative movement, and a lot of it is because of you. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. And keep up the great work you're doing in New York, my brother. We'll get together sometime soon when I get back.
Absolutely. All right. A good reunion there. Viewers and listeners, we will take a quick break and come back with this conversation. In retrospect, October 19th, 1983, reflecting and commemorating on the events that occurred in St. George's, Grenada, and reverberated across the Caribbean and indeed the world on October 19th, 1983. Please stand by. We will be right back after this. Unfortunately, every post-revolutionary government has failed to recognize October 19th and March 13th as two important days, and instead has declared October 25th as a national holiday, a day which was primarily focused on rescuing the students of the St. George's University, who were believed to be under siege by the then Revolutionary Military Council. I posed this question to Senator Yolande Bain, now that she is part of government. Would you be lobbying your government to observe October 19th as a public holiday, knowing that you are one of the affected families?
Well, I always thought of that, and my family have thought of it on many occasions. But I want to say that I will do my best, in my best power, to see how we can have October 19th as a holiday. I think it's significant. It's needed to be a holiday. We celebrate the 25th of October, and I believe that we should look towards celebrating the 19th of October as a holiday, when our loved ones, has passed away.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back to the Bub Report. In case you're wondering who that young lad was there, that was a young Kellen Bub back in 2002. As a student of history, that was one of the stories I enjoyed covering as a young reporter back then with the Community Channel 6. A credit to Mr. Dolland for hiring me at the time and for introducing me to a lot of revolutionary figures from that period, from whom I learned a great deal. So it's good to have that archival footage here, as Grenada now celebrates October 19th officially as a public holiday. Well, shall we say commemorates that holiday as a very important holiday in Grenadian history. So I want to bring back the panel as we close tonight's program. And I want both Merle and Ken to reflect on those final moments, of course, those agonizing moments of the Grenada Revolution, the waning days, and what you've been hearing around the tensions. Let us close this program with sort of a human interest introspection. Where were you when you heard that bloodshed ensued on Fort Rupert? And what were some of your immediate thoughts on hearing what occurred? Merle, I would begin with you.
Yes, well, I'd like to let you know that I was right inside the fort up there. I was there for that whole event when they shoot up the place and all of that. All of us flat on the ground. We didn't know.
So in essence, you almost lost your life on that day.
This is it. There were people falling out dead all around me. I don't. There were a few of us who came up there in support of him. In fact, to begin with, let me just add something. I know there's not much time, but I was in the Crefts home, Mrs. On Lucas Street, and we heard the commotion when they broke down the barriers and all that, and the car came down the hill with Morris and Uni and Jackie. And they stopped there. We stood at the front gate and we stopped so that the little boy, him and Jackie, the boy Vladimir, so that he could see them. They put him at the window so that they could see him and so. And then we got in our car and went up to the fort because we had been told that they were going to the hospital. And when we went there, they told us, no, they're going to be in the fort. So we went there and we lived through all of that. It wasn't only a few minutes we were there. It was quite a while. And then the bombing started. A lot of people were killed right inside there.
How long were you on the fort?
I would say it was something like half an hour. I remember when we were walking up, the owner of the hotel, the St. James Hotel, Mr. Louis, is it? I don't want to say the wrong name, but the owner of that hotel stopped us and said, go into the hotel. Then we were going up there. He said, go into the hotel and tell them to give you a basket of food for Morris and Jackie. And we did that. Of course, Morris didn't take any. He said, go and give the other people in the room who want some. So, but we were able to talk with one another, and there were people in there. I remember when I got up to help Mrs. Creft pick back up things to go back home because children were at home. I met the Calypsonian flying turkey. And he spoke to me. He said, do you trust everybody in here? I'm not so sure that everybody in here can be trusted. I don't know what came of that. But there were a lot of nurses there, a lot of PRA people that are coming.
I know that Ann Peters was there as well.
Yes.
Audrey.
Yes. And then Morris wanted to go and stand at the window and say and surrender, and the people in there told him, no. You can't. The members of the PRA, they told him, no, you can't do that. They will shoot you. Right. Then, and when we were coming out, well, then the bombing started, and it was only when I was back in Trinidad a couple of weeks later, and George Louison came over and came to see me, and he told me then what had been shot at us, a rocket-propelled grenade, and he said that is designed to demolish a person. Right, a lady who had come with us. A very pleasant, nice lady who did not participate in the revolution in any great way. She used to eat lunch at Mrs. Creft. Mrs. Creft used to provide lunch for some workers, and she decided to go with us. She had never been to a rally or anything in her life. And she was the one that it hit. She's the one that absorbed it, right? When we came out of there, we were so Bazodi. I don't know if everybody understands Bazodi in Patois.
I'm sure a quintessential Caribbean person would understand.
Yes, yes. And coming down the steps, we had almost forgotten about her because things were so crazy. And then walking down the step, there were people on either side dead, fellas who were outside. Morris had said to us, when you go back, because this is before they shut us up, Morris said to us that yes, Avis Ferguson, yes, the name of the lady who went with us, Avis Ferguson. So Morris had said to us, when you go out there, please tell the people to stay around, because as long as the people are there, they will not shoot up the place, right? Wrong, they did, they shot into and the thing came inside, and a lot of people were killed. There were people outside too. They shot the fellas who were outside with guns, trying to protect Morris as well. And then when we got home, not when we got home, before we reached home, Mrs. Creft said, hey, but where's Avis? And she wasn't located for days. She was in the funeral home, La Croix, I think. They discovered her. I mean, it is, that thing was, I mean, there's so much more. That whole day was crazy, so that I was.
So were you in the same room as Maurice?
Yes, it is I think they call it the operations room.
The ops room. So you were in the ops room, and you paint a picture that they came in.
They didn't come in. They shot from the outside.
They shot from the outside. So at what point did they take Maurice? At what point did they take Maurice from the ops room in that building and bring him to the square on the fort? Do you recall that moment?
To the square? You're talking about Pre the event. Sorry, what's there?
No, I'm talking about on the fort itself. So was Maurice killed inside of that ops room?
No, they took him out and a number of other people, and anybody who tried to escape, like Jackie, she was coming out, she following us, and I think Miss Peters as well. She had the experience of seeing them grab Jackie and say, "Where you think you're going?" I saw them grab Pumphead, a fella called Pumphead. I can't remember his real name. But he was leaving too, and somebody was sent to grab him and say, "Where are you going?" All of those people were killed. We were in there for a while, and I suppose they were trying to figure out what the next step is. I think Maurice had gone there hoping to have some kind of conciliatory discussion with them. But that didn't happen.
So how did you escape?
Oh, well, when the shooting died down and they had taken them away.
Taking them away in bodies. I'm sorry, body bags or trucks.
No, they weren't shot up inside the fort. They took them out to the wall where they shot them in the.
That's what I meant, the wall. So the square, that's what I meant. That's
but we didn't see that. We didn't see that. We managed to go home, and there was a girl in the road shouting and crying and saying that, oh, they killed Maurice. She took off her blouse and she was, really in a state. But we were home, and we were settled at home for a little while when we heard the shooting. And a young man who lived there, right, said, well, they're shooting up one another now. And it was in the night that we realized what had happened. In the night when Mr. Austin came on.
That announcement in which he stated who was killed at the time.
Yes. In fact, we might have found it. We might have heard that before, because Mrs. Kreft's daughter, who lives in Barbados, phoned and said that, it's this one, that one had been killed, and including Jackie. And the funniest thing is that both Mrs. Kreft and her husband, Jackie's parents, each of them spoke to the daughter. She phoned in tears, crying because she had just heard it. And neither of them believed it. Each of them independently, each one was saying that he said, that Maurice Bishop, Jackie Kreft, this one, that one, that they had been seized. Each of them heard that independent of the other before they even had the chance to exchange notes. So both parents got that impression that what had been said by Austin was that they had been seized, I mean, that was a crazy day, you see?
And then, of course, we had that 6 or 7 days of uncertainty with the curfew. So obviously, no one knew what was happening then. Did you feel then during that curfew period that your life was in danger in any way? How did you that period? I'm sure that was
well, we were right. There was one moment when I felt threatened. It was that people were going into, well, of course, the police were sent home. We saw the police going home up the hill. They chased them. The Americans chased home the police, who would have been, this is through the Krebs window. They live on Lucas Street, and we were looking down, and the police were going home. And then at one point, the people started looting, and they were coming up the street, up Lucas Street, with things on their heads that they had taken out of stores. And there was no police. The police had been dismissed by the Americans, and I wasn't seeing any American soldiers, and I don't think they were interested in protecting us. So that is the one time I thought, well, okay, there could be some violence here with people coming into your house and all of that. Apart from that, when you're in that kind of situation, you just feel numb. You see, I was on the floor with bullets all around me, but I never got hysterical then. I'll tell you that the time when I got hysterical was when George Louison came to Trinidad and told me and my family that he came to, where we live. And he told us that it was this thing called a rocket-propelled grenade, and that is supposed to, I'm not sure he said it was anti-personnel, but he said that anybody who that hit was demolished. And as it happened, the person who came up with us, Miss Avis Ferguson, who came there, because she came to give solidarity, although she had never really participated in anything. She wasn't anti the revolution, but, and she is the one, he said, who absorbed it. And that meant that she was torn in two, that she, and as well as a lot. I mean, it bursts into, I think that disintegrates and scatters. Or there was also shooting, apart from the tank that projected this. Yes, there were people all, I guess, also shooting into the window with ordinary guns. I don't know. I just know that there was a lot of shooting and things passing. Mrs. Kraft got something here. I can't remember what you call it. A bullet grazed her, right? I got some kind of little mark on my foot as well. But I mean, it is something. It was quite unbelievable. You would think you were in a dream, But as I say, people can get very quiet and calm in that situation because you think you're dead. You're about to leave, So and there was no way of avoiding it and no way of getting away at that point. They opened the door.
Absolutely. Yeah. Professor Collins, this is a conversation that we need to continue to have because we need to document this for Grenadian history and for future generations as well to know what occurred during that period. So what you're doing is in essence a public service, and I hope that it's also therapeutic for you being Grenada for this commemoration. So we certainly are going to have you back again, and please look out for any future invitations from us here on the Bub Report. And Mr. Lewis, I'm going to get to you, sir. You were in Cuba at the time. I'm sure that in Cuba, for the Grenadian students who were there hearing about the collapse of the revolution under such violent and tragic circumstances was not what you were expecting to hear on October 19th.
Yeah, there was a lot of uncertainty because you got to remember that's not the days of
it was not the internet age.
It was not the internet age. So
yeah.
So we were hearing things like people were passing information piece by piece. I was in Santiago, so people would come from Havana and give information and that sort of stuff. But there were, I'm not superstitious, but I remember I had a picture of Maurice Bishop above my head. And the night before, the picture kept falling. The picture was up, it was taped, it didn't fall for probably a year. I had it up, and while sleeping, the picture fell. When you're sleeping and you get up and you're like, stick it, why don't you just stay up, and go back to sleep, and it fell again. And I always remember that incident because the next day, it happened that he was killed, and but there were, in Cuba there was tension that would have exaggerated, just like Grenada, within the party, because of course I as a party person, and there were a number of us who were like that, and the general student body, but I think because we were general friends and we were normally good people, it didn't spiral into anything out, and most of us were very confused and didn't know what was happening, and that was the problem. And the Cuban government was very supportive with us, knowing the situation that we had at that time. But I want to say that I just wanted to make one other comment that Don had raised, that it's time for healing. The problem is that you can't tell people when to heal. And I've realized that there's a lot of people who still suffer from those traumatic events. And it's not, Grenada has a particular problem because of our small size and everybody being intertwined. In other words, South Africa had a big truth and reconciliation movement. In Grenada, it's really like families going against families with your own siblings. So it becomes a lot more. It becomes a lot more difficult because people personally.
It's extremely personal. Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's extremely personal. Mm-hmm. And so 40 years later, may sound as a very long time, but for a lot of people, this is still hurting, because while many people may talk about the benefits of the revolution, there were a lot of benefits. It's something we got to talk about a lot more. But those 5-6 days were very traumatic to some people, and my heart goes out to them, and I hope they find their peace.
Absolutely. Mr. Lewis, thank you so much. This is your first time on the Bub Report. I'm not too sure what took us so long to invite you, but we certainly want to have you back as well. as well as Professor Collins. It's your first time on the Bub Report, but we want to have you back. So I will give you
remember
Hodge. I keep saying Hodge.
Yes,
Professor
yes.
Hodge.
Merle is my friend too, so it's okay. It's no
Yes,
insult.
I mix up the two Merles all the time. Yes, Professor Hodge,
Thank
we
you
would
so
love
much,
to have you
Kellon,
back.
and I'm a real fan of your work.
Oh,
absolutely.
I'm a really big fan of your program.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Professor, final comments?
I mean, sorry.
Comments from you?
I just want to say again that I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad that so much of the spirit of the revolution, I think, is still there. I know and I see it, and that the young people are just not aware of what really happened for those 4 years, but they can still know. It's not that is not something we can't conquer. Making the information available to them. And what I want to say about the revolution and its future, because I think that revolution has provided a blueprint, right, for especially in the area of popular participation in decision making and those structures that they had begun to build. The blueprint is there. People can take it up, you know.
Viewers and listeners, that was our first part of our own retrospective look back at the Grenada Revolution. Stay tuned for part 2 on Sunday. We have a treat for you on Sunday as well in the regularly scheduled time slot for the Bub Report at 10 a.m. Eastern on social media, as well as at 8 p.m. on WPG10 with a repeat at 5 p.m. on GBN on Wednesdays. So please stay tuned for that program on Sunday, where we'll be continuing that retrospective look. So we want to thank our Professor Merle Hodge. We want to thank Mr. Ken Lewis. And earlier we had Mr. Don Rojas, who was at the time of the demise of the revolution, the press secretary to the late Prime Minister Maurice Bishop. On behalf of the producers of the Bub Report, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. We thank you for tuning in for this evening's special edition of the Bub Report, in which we pause to reflect and commemorate the demise of the Grenada Revolution 40 years later. Thank you now. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.